Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. Our fathers hold a very special place in our hearts. Through the years, they were there for helping us grow up and to mature and to be who we are. They taught us discipline. They coached us in sports and life. They taught us to respect others, and maybe most importantly of all, with our moms, they teach us how to love. My guest today has wonderful memories of the lessons that her father taught her. In fact, she wrote a book about it. Things my father taught me about love. Beautiful, beautiful little book that's packed with all kinds of not just memories, but things that allow us to touch back into our lives and those who have loved us. Mary Morrell is the founder and director of Wellspring Communications, specializing in writing, speaking, and editorial work for diocesan, parish, and school communities. Mary previously served as the managing editor of The Monitor, the paper for our own diocese, associate editor and catechetical consultant for Renew International, and as associate director of the Office of Religious Education for our sister diocese, the Diocese of Metuchen. Her long-running syndicated column, Things My Father Taught Me, has generated several Catholic Press Awards, as have her feature stories and advertisements. Mary, who's a member of the National Association of Professional Women, holds a bachelor degree in English from Siena College in Londonville, New York, a certificate in religious studies from Felician College in Lodi, and a master's degree in Jewish Christian studies from Seton Hall University, South Orange. Wow, Mary, got a lot of degrees. Welcome to the Catholic Corner.
Thank you.
Maybe we can just kind of begin a little bit. When did you kind of realize that you were interested in writing, or you had a gift for writing?
Actually, I used to write when I was very young.
Yeah?
As soon as
like
I
grammar
learned how
school
to-
even?
Yes.
Terrific.
I had a fascination with empty notebooks and pencils.
Wow.
And I would write poetry to my parents and little stories, and I just always loved writing. So I've been writing since then.
Do you still have some of those old notebooks that you had with you?
I did find a few when I was cleaning out my parents' home after they passed away, yes.
Yeah.
It was funny to read some of those things.
You know, that's a special gift. I mean, I know when parents go to God, there's always a hurt, and part of us goes, and we just can't reach the telephone or give a hug or say.
Sure.
In fact, just recently I said to somebody, do you know what hurts? And we talked about just losing our parents,
Yes.
But when you find stuff like that around the house, that they've had in a drawer or they had in the old bookcase, it really, really puts a smile on our hearts,
It
doesn't
does, yes.
Yeah, I
Wonderful
hope you kept
memories.
some of those.
Oh, I did.
That's
I did.
terrific, So you started writing as a youngster. Did you ever realize that you're going to end up being I'll say a specialist in religious and spiritual writing?
I had a sense that I would be writing something spiritual, if not in the church, at least about the mysteries of life, because that's what my father was interested in. But I didn't realize I would end up writing in the church environment, in the Catholic Church environment.
Was
framework.
your dad a writer?
No, actually, my dad, father never graduated from He graduated from 8th grade, and then he had to take care of his mom after his father died.
Yeah, those years, that's what
Yes.
happened.
So he did not write, but he did graduate from high school with his GED the day I graduated from college.
Oh, wow.
So we had a big party.
I was going to say, I hope you
Yes.
celebrated together.
We did. And then he did take one college course because he always wanted to say that he went to college. But he told wonderful stories. So writing wasn't an issue. He told them, orally.
And that's a tradition also that's
Yes,
very, very
yeah.
sacred.
He's Irish.
And, I was,
Yeah.
We can tell stories, I'll tell you
Yes,
that.
Yes.
So you majored in English. Was that part of your initial plan? Like you said to yourself as a young woman that I really would like to learn more about either writing or storytelling?
Actually, I went to college for a liberal arts degree because my mom always wanted me to be able to take care of myself and not have to rely on a husband if, in case I chose not to enter into that vocation. And during my college years, I really struggled with what I was going to do, what kind of degree was I going to get, and for what purpose. And then one day, one of my English professors, who later was the celebrant at my marriage to my husband at the university, wrote in the margins of one of my papers, "You are a writer." And he underlined it a few times and put a few exclamation marks next to it. And that's what propelled me into actually writing.
Isn't that terrific?
Yeah.
Isn't that terrific?
Yep. Affirmation.
Have you seen that priest since? I mean, have you let him know that, or maybe
I
he knows
haven't
already?
seen him, but I have contacted him. I researched him until I found him. He was still at the school. And he wrote back to me to tell me that he also had written and published a book, so we exchanged books. I'm hoping he's still with us, but it's been a while.
But I just think that's neat that somebody touches our life in a certain way that gives us that impetus or confidence.
Yes.
And it's interesting how some people can look at us when we're younger and see something in us that maybe we might see it, but we're afraid to see it.
That's exactly right. I was afraid to say that I was a writer, and then he put it into words for me, and I could then say it legitimately.
Yeah. We're always afraid that, gee, maybe I'll do this or do that. And maybe nobody's going to want me.
And that's right. Maybe I'll fail.
Yeah. But when you first got involved in spiritual writing, what was that about? Or writing for the church?
I always felt, first of all, I guess I never really understood how people could be cruel to one another. Even as a child, I had a hard time with that. And I think I thought if I could remind people that they were of noble birth, that God was their parent, that they would have an easier time remembering that calls them to some responsibility, and also to care for themselves and to love their potential and see what they could do with the life that God had given them. And that's what I really started out to do, to remind people of their relationship with God.
Terrific. When you talk like that, Mary, I think, I don't know if we understand God as much as we should.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we call God God, I think that puts him away. When we call him Abba and understand, like you just said, he's our Father.
Right.
We're his children, and to feel that, not just to say it in words.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing when you can understand that. I think it's another gift. Huh? So tell me a little bit. Things My Father Taught Me About Love. That wasn't your first book.
No.
I think there was another book you wrote. Angels and high top sneakers. That's quite an interesting
Unusual
title.
topic, right?
And,
Originally, the book was titled Through the Strength of Heaven. And it was written as a reflection journal for catechists when I was working in the Diocese of Metuchen.
Okay.
And when Loyola got a hold of a copy of that book, they decided to publish it, but they changed it to something they thought was a little bit more spiffy for readers, and they chose the topic of one of the stories inside, which was when I fell down the front porch steps in my home and was half conscious, and a herd of elementary school children came running over right past me into my house and said to my husband, "Your wife has fallen and she can't get up." So they were the Angels in High Top Sneakers.
Ah, that's the story. That's how you got the title.
That's how I got it.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. And that kind of was an impetus for your other book, Things My Father Taught Me. And that came from a column that you actually had by that title?
Yes, in 1995, after the death of my father, I was already working at the Catholic Spirit newspaper in the Diocese of Metuchen. And I was able to start a weekly column. I wanted to do something to honor him. And I remember after a few years, one of the priests came past me at a dinner we were at together, and he whispered in my ear and said, "What are you going to do when you run out of stories that your father taught you?" And I said, "Well, if you make that a capital F for father, the stories are inexhaustible, so I don't plan on running out." And I'm still writing it. It's been 20 years.
20 years. Every
Yes.
week, or how often do you put a story
Now
in?
it's, newspapers don't always come out every week anymore, so I'm down to about once a month. But I publish in several newspapers, so I try to write at least twice a month.
Storytelling is dear to my heart, Mary. I think there was like one original story, and we just keep expanding on that one original story. And I also think stories do a lot of things. They can heal us.
Yes.
Many times people say to me, when they're hurting inside, they'll say, how do I get rid of this hurt? I said, tell the story.
True.
And when you tell it again, and tell it again, until all of a sudden the story somehow takes away the pain and it becomes part of something else.
Absolutely.
Deep in our life. Your books have stories, but they're not just meant to be read. Because I don't think stories are ever meant just to be read.
That's true.
But you want us to kind of reflect on our stories? Tell me a little bit more about that in your heart.
Well, when the story first comes out as a column, it's really just an opportunity to read it. But when it's made into an element of the book, I always add a reflection section at the end of every story, which asks the readers to consider some questions and how it impacts their life and their spiritual growth. Because I've always felt that we have a tendency to be reactionary as people, as human beings. And I think it's important to develop a sense of reflection, to reflect on things before we speak or before we act. So by adding that reflection element at the end of every story, people have an opportunity to think about what the story means to them.
You're reminding me of one of our great priests that's my age or about that. Father Bill Bausch has written some books himself.
I have his books.
And Father Bill is just a great man and a great priest.
Mm-hmm.
But he said one time, and I'll never forget this, he said, if you tell a story once, it's a story. If you tell a story the second time, you become a theologian. And if you tell the story the third time, you become a mystic. And he said, and that's kind of what you're saying, I think. It's that mysticism of taking the blessings of God and putting them into our own stories and seeing our stories as related back to God's stories and allowing them to be really a part of our life and part of our prayer.
Right. Yes.
Which is
absolutely.
a beautiful, beautiful thing. What do you hope that people will get from I was going to say reading your work, but I got a sense that it's just not reading your work.
It's more than
that.
I want them to feel good. I want them to feel that their lives have meaning, that they're not alone in what they struggle with. I have readers that will write to me and tell me they reread the same book every season, whether it's a Lenten reflection or if it's for Advent or if they're traveling, they take it with them. And I said to one reader who's become a friend, how can you keep reading the same book over and over again? And she said, because every time I read it, I learn something new. So that's very humbling for me.
Do some of them send you stories about that they might like themselves?
Yes, they share. It's amazing to me what people actually will share with me because I've shared something genuine in my life with them, not to preach or not to even motivate, but just to share. I had an extremely powerful experience of someone who was contemplating suicide, and he was angry about something that I had written. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was because I said God will embrace people who are that ill that they would contemplate suicide. And we started to correspond through email. He was in another state. And he wrote to me and told me he had changed his mind because of our conversations and because of what I had written. And he went on to get a job that he loved and stayed in touch with me for a couple of years.
What a beautiful thing.
Yeah. But it wasn't me. That's God working, the Holy Spirit working in people's lives.
That's the story. That's the story in you and this gentleman you talked about. And I always feel that our story is a part of God's story.
Yes.
Sometimes I even tell people, if you lived 2,000 years ago, you might have been in the other book.
That's true.
There's another great storyteller who has gone to God, Father Anthony DeMello. And Father Anthony used to... if he gave a lecture or if he gave a retreat, more than a lecture, part of being part of his life story was that you had to give him a story, and he would sometimes use that story or not use the story, but it was part of, I think, the ongoing understanding that our stories do touch each other and reflect, on the great story of God. You just told me about one response you got from any other responses that you got from some of your other stories or your writings?
I get many, many responses from readers. They send me things in the mail, or they send me notes. They write to me through email. One of the most powerful, aside from the one I just shared with you, was when I was giving a workshop, and one of the workshop participants came to me and said, you don't know me, but I read your column regularly, and I've read your book. That was Angels in High-Top Sneakers. And she said, I made a copy of a column that you wrote about forgiveness. And she said, my family was very broken because we could not forgive each other, and we live all over the country. And she sent it to everyone in the family. And she said, because of that, we've all reconciled. And we're now back together as a family. It's just amazing how stories can change people's lives. Because that's all I'm doing is sharing the story of my own life. Maybe sometime I wasn't forgiving, or when I did forgive, and how that was fruitful for me and how it changed things for me. And people take it to heart because it's not preaching to them. It's helping them to find God and God's presence in their life. I mean, God's always there, but we do lose track of it sometimes.
Don't we find, Mary, that that we're all pretty much the same? Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes we don't want to admit that, I guess, but it's nice to know that. That's why I think storytelling is so beautiful, because all of a sudden you can kind of relate, like you said, forgiveness, which is, I guess, a theme certainly of Pope Francis with his beautiful expressions of mercy that he preaches so well. But I sometimes wonder, even in our own great faith, that we don't understand forgiveness as much as we really should. Mm-hmm. And sometimes stories just it's like opening up the lock, you know.
Right.
And once in a while we think, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this way. Well, that's not true. We all have. Honestly, we're all the same exactly, but we all have ways, or we all have things that are inside of us that storytelling does open it up, which is just a marvelous mm-hmm. thing. What are some of your favorite stories?
To be perfectly honest, once I write a story, I forget that I've written it. I probably have 500 stories.
Wow.
And I don't remember until I review them, maybe to put them into a book, that I've written something, and I'm like, wow, I wrote that. That's amazing to me. But my readers will remind me. And for some reason, there's a story called Love is something about sweet peas and angels. I think it's in this in the second book, Things My Father Taught Me About Love. And I don't know why this is such a fascinating story for the readers, because to me it was just, okay, it was ho-hum, I thought. But they find something fascinating in it. It's about my father planting flowers outside my bedroom window, sweet peas, and it had to do with loss and how loss is the most transforming moment in our life. And then about angels. The April angel will carry sweet peas is how I end the story. And people keep writing me about this story, so I have to go back and really read it myself and find out what it is that's speaking to them.
Well, it sounds to me that, when you talk about a dad or mom, mm-hmm. There are always sometimes you think back and say, yeah, there's special days or nights or when you're talking about that, about sweet peas. I remember my own dad used to sing to my sister, and how it just made her smile, like going to bed at night. And mm-hmm. I mean, I think those kind of stories you just never forget, and the memory's alive. It's not something you just kind of think about.
Right.
It's almost like
mm-hmm.
they're right next to you. I was going to read a part of the epilogue of your book, Things My Father Taught Me About Love, and maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about it. In this epilogue, it says, there's an Arab proverb that identifies prayer as the pillow of religion. Mm-hmm. What a great expression. And it says something like this: for most people, the image of pillow will conjure up the idea of rest, and certainly prayer is a powerful source of rest for our spirit. But a primitive root of the Hebrew word for pillow means to fill hollows. How comforting it is to think of prayer as that which fills the hollows of our soul. Learning to love and learning to live well is not an easy lesson. Jesus' love is not a greeting card kind of love. It is self-giving, sacrificial, the reason for his being, and for the choices he made while on earth. To walk in his footsteps and love as he loves seems at times an impossible task for mere humans like us, unless we also fill the hollows with prayer. Isn't that beautiful? Tell me about
Thank
that.
you.
Where did you get that or write that, or what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm half Arab and half Irish, and so anything Arabic appeals to me. And I was reading a book that talked about what that word meant in Arabic, and that's how inspiration comes to me. I can read one little thing, and then I'm off and writing. But prayer is so important to me because it's how I get through all of the challenges of life. And more than just talking, people think of prayer mostly as talking to God, asking for something, or worshiping. For me, it's more about filling up the places in my life that are empty. And I fill them up with my relationship with God by talking to God in one way or another. And if I can't think of something to say, if I'm scared or if I'm upset, I revert to saying the rosary mentally. Hail Marys. I can't tell you how many Hail Marys I've said in my lifetime because it keeps me connected and it fills up the spaces.
What are some of the hollows of our soul?
I think things that carve out the hollows in our lives are things like fear and doubt, and not a lack of faith so much as of the fear of what that generates in us if I don't have faith, or if I am afraid to love, because it means I have to respond, I have to give back, and I might not be able to. I might not have it in me to give back what I'm receiving, and so we allow spaces to enter into our lives that need to be filled up. I think I related well to what was taught to me when I was in getting my master's degree about God filled up all the space in the universe, but to allow space for us, he had to withdraw so that we could be there. So space is not just us, but creation itself. Space is a very powerful thing for me when I think about it. What's the best way to fill up the space? Does it need to be filled up? It's almost like in music, without the spaces, there's no melody. It's just a cacophony of sounds. So sometimes space needs to be filled up, and sometimes we need to just listen to it and evaluate it and decide what we need to do with it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Could space at sometimes be just the silence of our lives?
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yes.
because especially I think at this time of our life, it just seems there's so much noise in a way, and so much. We're constantly bombarded with
Yes.
everything, and maybe we just haven't learned to, or we're afraid of the silence.
Afraid of it, I think.
You know.
I think that's why so many people are constantly on their cell phones, because they're afraid of the silence, of not having something to do or say. So they fill it up with that.
And yet, there's a beautiful prayer of silence that allows God to get into that space that I think you're talking about,
Yes.
Mary. And good friends don't have to chat.
Talked. That's true.
I mean, sometimes, like, when you're talking about your dad and your family, there are times when I see, I'm sure it will be with your dad in those days. They don't have to be just talking all the time. Sometimes they can just sit next to each other or be in the same room with each other.
Yes.
And there's a comfort to that. And I say to myself, if that's the comfort of humans, isn't it the comfort of God? We don't have to always kind of just. In fact, sometimes I say to myself, even in my own prayer, you can almost hear God saying, would you just keep quiet? Just,
Yeah.
You're talking.
Stop
How can I
talking.
talk back to you if you're talking all the
Right.
time? And I think it's nice to just sometimes sit there and with creation, when you talk about the hollowness of God's, or God withdrew, and what did he leave? He left, the air and the mountains and the rain and so much is there for us.
Yes.
Do some of your stories reflect those kind of mysteries?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
most of them, in some
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah, because it's all part of our life.
Yes.
You know, I would wonder if you don't mind, I'd like to read a little bit about from one of your books here, the things my father taught me, and because it is so beautiful and reflective. You're talking about there's peace beneath the wings of love, and you say talking about your dad. I'm sure, huh? We understood each other, and he said he reminded me of an often painful truth. It's hard to be human. It's hard to be human because it hurts to be human. And it hurts for the same reason that it's a joy, because we love. It seems the more we love, the more we're open to hurt from loving. And the experience may leave us wondering if love is worth it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I remember the story that comes from, which is why I'm getting a little choked up.
That's prayer.
That's
Go ahead.
true.
Tell me a little bit about it, though.
I was at my father's wake, and the youngest of my 6 sons was 5 years old, and he was drawing little, I gave him a little notebook to keep him busy, and he was drawing X's and O's, like, kisses and hugs, and he was going up to the coffin, and he was putting them around my dad's body. And he climbed up on my lap, and he said, well, he started to cry a little bit, and this woman nearby said to him, oh, look, he's just like a little person. And my son looked up at me and he said, I don't like to be a little person because it hurts. And I said to him, it hurts to be a big person too. And he looked at me and he saw me crying and he wiped the tears away from my cheek. And it was like this moment of understanding, a child can understand grief and hurt and love as much as an adult. It was a very memorable experience for me.
There's a story, something like that, Mary, where a brother said to the abbot, I love you. And the abbot said, do you know what hurts me? He said, why would you ask that one? I just told you I love you. He said, because if you don't know what hurts me, it's not possible to say I love you.
That's true.
That's all part of your book, Mary. Thank you. God love you, sweetheart. And thanks for the heart that you brought with you today. For
You're
information
welcome.
about Mary's books and her writings, you can go to Wellspring Communications, typepad.com, Wellspring. Bless you. Tell your story. Allow your story to be part of God's story.
Yes.
That story does make us smile, heals us, and tells us about love. Mary, God love you. Thank you.
Thank you.